Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining very early, some of you. We've got a few minutes before we start, so time to get a wee cup of tea, as I am doing. And if you want to contribute to the chat and ask some questions later or enter the giveaways, you have to make sure that you're signed into YouTube. See you soon. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the book launch for The Stone in My Pocket. So, this is a wee bit different. Last time I did a book launch, it was in person. A lot of you were there. We were in Glasgow at the Hillhead Book Club. A wee bit different this time, so do it online. It's an interesting change, but maybe this will be even better. So welcome, thank you so much for tuning in. And there's lots of people saying hello already, so that's very nice and supportive. I am Matthew Keeley. A lot of you know me. Some of you maybe have no idea who I am. I'm going to be talking to you today about my new novel, The Stone in My Pocket. Lots of things happening in the next hour. I will be telling you about the book. I will be reading a couple of extracts. We'll be doing some giveaways, so you've got a chance to win some books and a crystal gift set from Opal Moon in Glasgow. And if I've learned to point properly, yes, there's their logo up there. I feel like a new weatherman trying to figure out how to point at things in mirror image. I'll also be telling you later on about how you can get your hands on the book and how you can get a discounted price, and that's only for anybody tuning in today. A wee reminder again, if you want to ask some questions later on, or if you want to enter the giveaways, you have to be signed in to YouTube to enter things in the chat. So, before I start reading from the book, or before I start telling you about it, I'm going to show you the book trailer. Some of you have seen this, some of you this may be brand new, so this might give you a bit of a flavour in a very short space about what kind of novel this is going to be. So, that's hopefully given you a wee insight into the kind of novel The Stone in My Pocket is. Before I tell you more about that, I'm going to talk to you about our first giveaway today. So I have some paperbacks that you could win. I have 3 books. The first comes a pair. So I have some novels from Jason S. Litz, who's an American author. He has donated his novels Persimmon Apricot Gunfighter and Thrust from the Hand of God. Now, both of these are, as you can tell from the cover here, this is a Western. These are sort of adventure novels set in the US. Persimmon Apricot is the very unusually named protagonist of this novel. So I'm peeking behind the book, I'm not quite sure why. This is a really exciting read. The main character, Persimmon, is a very lonely character with some secrets and loss in his past, and this is a journey across America for him to find a bit of redemption. Similarly, Thrust from the Hand of God is as an adventure story set in the US, kind of historical fiction as well. And this is based on John, who is a fugitive, and he's murdered someone. And as you can see, it's an epic adventure. So you could be winning these. I have another book by Gail Aldwin. So Gail Aldwin is a British writer, and she's written The String Games. Now, this book was a finalist for the People's Book Prize in 2020. This is a kind of a coming-of-age novel, a bit of a mystery as well. The main character is Nim, and Nim suffered a really devastating event in her childhood. Her brother was killed on a family holiday, and this story charts Nim as she grows up and sort of comes to terms with that, but as an adult tries to sort of find out more about what really happened. So there are some twists and turns here. To enter to win either of the books, all you need to do is this. So you just need to type the word book into the YouTube chat there. That's all you need to do. Book, and you're in with a chance of winning. Now, some people have got early entries because a few people shared my video on Friday on Instagram and Facebook. So there's a few people already in the running. However, you can enter again, and you'll have another chance to win. So, lots of people entering already. That's fantastic. While you're all entering the giveaway, I'm going to talk to you about The Stone in My Pocket, and where the ideas for this came about and how the book came to exist. So I had written, this is my second novel. I wrote a science fiction time travel novel that was published in 2019 called Turning the Hourglass. Turning the Hourglass was quite complex and difficult to plot out, and it was written in third person. And I decided after that I really wanted to write something in first person, something a bit more, a bit closer to home. So I actually started writing The Stone in My Pocket before Turning the Hourglass was published. So there was a bit of an overlap there. And some people have already been asking me questions about where the idea came from, and how did I come up with this. I didn't have one single idea that came fully formed. The Stone in My Pocket resulted from a few different ideas amalgamating. So I wanted to write a story in first person, and I wanted a younger narrator this time. So the main character, Nathan, is 17. I definitely wanted to write something with a little hint of the supernatural, something a bit eerie, a bit magical about it, because those were the books that I was always interested in when I was a teenager. I read the Goosebumps books and the Point horror books. This isn't a horror, but it does have kind of creepy elements to it. So I knew I wanted to include that. And one of the biggest inspirations for this book is places that I spent a lot of time in growing up. Now, I grew up in a wee town. This novel is set in a really small village in Scotland in 1999. The village is fictional. It's called Drayton. But I definitely based that on a couple of places I spent a lot of time. Between the ages of about 12 and 15 or 16, I went away at weekends to a caravan with my mum and dad. So we spent many years in a wee town called Comrie, I know a lot of you know, and Callander as well. So I got a wee taste of living in a tiny village at the weekends, and the beautiful scenery and some of the interesting folk who lived there. And both Comrie and Callendar had little bookshops that I loved. And I always knew that I wanted to write a story that was somehow set in a bookshop, or where the bookshop was important. So a lot of the Stone in My Pocket is set in such a bookshop with a bit of a secret about it. The novel really begins with Nathan when he's 17. He is about to begin his final year of high school. So it's his 6th year, and the novel begins the night before the new term after the summer holidays. So what I'll do now is read the first chapter from the novel. Here we go. Chapter 1, August 1999. At first, I thought it was the cat. Sometimes Freya would be out there in the garden at night, yowling to come in or chattering at birds she couldn't catch. Or if it wasn't her, maybe a fox. I'd heard them howling like babies in the dark a few times. Then it wailed again. No, not a wail, duller than that. A moan. That's when sickness lurched in my stomach. The same kind of plummet when you realise you've been caught lying again, or your parents ask you a question you don't want to answer. I knew the noise wasn't Freya or a fox or any animal. It was coming from a person. A voice. I wouldn't have heard it if my bedroom window hadn't been open. I only did that in summer. The TV that I wasn't supposed to be watching this late was already turned down low, but I clicked the mute button, amplifying the groaning voice seeping into the room. Then I turned the lamp off to get rid of my gormless reflection in the window and let me see out there. But the blue-white light from the TV still danced against the walls and glowed in the glass. The voice sniffled to a stop. They, whoever they were, must have spotted the lamp turning off, must have seen me. The bushy edge of a moonlit conifer shuffled in a sudden breeze, and I pictured a man out there, someone drunk or homeless hiding in the dark, trying to break in and rob us. I've no idea why I thought of that. Weird what fear conjures. Drayton wasn't exactly crawling with Sunday night binge drinkers, and I don't think I even saw a homeless person until I was about 11 and in Edinburgh for the day in a primary school trip. A dark-skinned woman with a patterned shawl around her head had held out a paper cup to me. I thought she was doing a magic trick until the teacher shoved me along by my shoulders. I crouched by the open window. The voice was there again, gulping in juddered breaths like something wounded. It didn't sound like a kid or someone my age, but I couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman or even how near they were. I pulled the window open a little more and squinted out. Clouds drifted and the moon bathed the garden in grey-blue sheen, but it was empty. No cat roaming under the bushes, no fox rummaging in the wheelie bin, no woman with a cup. The old rusted swing chains weren't even squeaking in the wind, and beyond the back fence, the black river gurgled past, higher than usual. No one could escape out there when it was this dark without falling in. But I still felt eyes prodding at me from some secret place. I'd learned the sensation years ago. Shivering, I swallowed and poked my head out into air that now felt too cool for August. I peered down to see if someone was standing right beneath me, pressed against the wall, but there was nothing except empty, blank concrete slabs. And the moaning had stopped. I ducked back in and yanked the window closed like I'd just flung a spider from a glass. Most other people might have shouted for their parents or rushed to their room to tell them, but there was no point in telling my mum and dad. They wouldn't believe me. Stopped listening to my nonsense years ago. Back to bed, Nathan, it'd be. They'd tell me the noise was only Freya, or maybe something a little more cliched about it being the wind, or that old houses just creaked at night. That's usually a stupid explanation for things like this in books and films. I turned to the muted TV to see Mulder and Scully scarper with torches around a dark building, chasing some black creature. Not helping. Nick would ask me at school if I'd watched it, but I'd been taping it, so I could catch up another night. Maybe when I hadn't just heard a disembodied voice in my garden. My mum had caught me in the middle of an episode one night last year and banned it. It'll cause more nightmares, Nathan. What other 17-year-old still had their parents telling them what they weren't allowed to watch? Nick's parents had been letting him watch horror films since before high school. That's what he told me anyway. I switched the TV off and clambered onto the bed, feeling like poison was swelling in my guts. At least it's what I imagined poison would feel like. Every few seconds I turned to the window, thinking I could hear it again, but the voice was just an echo in my head by then. I never can sleep early on a Sunday night, especially not before the start of a new school term, but now the idea of tucking myself into bed and drifting off was a joke. I pulled my knees towards my chin and checked my watch. Almost midnight. I flicked the switch on my lamp and lifted the book from the bedside table, pulling my makeshift bookmark, a Love Videos loyalty card I'd lifted from a pile in my dad's shop, out from the middle of Mysteries Unsolved, Beasts and Aliens. Everyone at school just tucked over the corner of whatever page they'd read to in a book, but I'd always hated that. I think my mum had told me not to do it once when I was little, and the tick had wedged itself in the pages of my brain. I'd had most of the Mysteries Unsolved series for years, but I only used to look at the pictures and read the captions under the weirdest ones. My mum hadn't even wanted me to keep them when we'd moved house, but Dad had slid them in a cardboard box for me. I found them in my wardrobe a few weeks ago and started reading them again after discovering the late-night X-Files repeats. I glanced down at a page with a printed photograph of a blurry, dark human shape between tree trunks. Was that what was out there, calling for me to listen? I looked to the window, then closed the book again, shoving it back to the table. My mum had probably been right about the nightmares. It had been months since she had shaken me awake in darkness. I didn't want that to start again. My final plan was to scuttle to the chair at my desk and turn on the little spotlight lamp above my model, the Empire State Building. Finishing the silver paint on the needle helped me forget what I'd heard, for a while at least. The last time I remember seeing on the clock was 2:58. I woke myself up, my feet squirming like thrashing fish outside the rumpled covers. I didn't remember climbing into bed or turning the lights out, and I'd fallen asleep on my back, which I never did. When I pushed myself up onto my forearms, I saw it. Her. Him. The shadowed figure standing in my doorway. I swallowed a scream, my tongue numb and my body a useless plastic mannequin. Hurling my limp arm across to the lamp, I smacked it onto the floor, then half lunged out of the bed to grab it, fumbling with the switch, panting. Light flicked back into the room and I tumbled out from the covers, my hip thudding onto the floor. When I spun around, it was gone. The door was open and nothing was there. Just flowery hallway wallpaper filling the space and the quick pumping of my heartbeat punching my ears. In my dreams, hours later, I was tiny, living inside the Empire State Building model. It filled up with silvery water and I couldn't get out. A familiar man's giant face stared at me through the window and I heard the sound again, the muffled, keening voice. But it wasn't coming from the man outside. It was my voice, drowning. And that's the end of chapter 1. So, how did it go from being one chapter I'd written to being this tangible book that I have here? Well, it really took about 6 or 7 years to write this, which seems like an awful long time, and I often hear writers talking about writing a book in 6 months or a year. I am writing, I'm also a full-time teacher, and a lot of you know me from school. Hello. I'd make a joke about homework or something here. So in between teaching, I wrote this at weekends and school holidays. Thank goodness for them. After about this is really the 8th full redraft that we have here, and of course there are lots of little revisions and edits and cuts and changes throughout. That first chapter has probably been edited about 100 times. But 8 full redrafts of the whole manuscript with lots of help along the way. So I have writer friends who read the book for me, a lot of some of the writers who worked on my first novel, Turning the Hourglass, and a few new people helped read The Stone in My Pocket and give me their advice. So that helped shape it into what it is now. And then, of course, started the grueling task of submitting. A huge part of being a writer who wants to get anything published is the submission process. And I don't think you can really get very far as a writer without accepting you are going to have to spend an inordinate amount of time submitting things to literary agents and competitions and publishers and having 99% of that rejected or ignored. Eventually I was very lucky. So I was offered, after a long wait, I was offered 2 publishing contracts. One was from a publisher in London, they were a hybrid publisher, which means the author invests some of the money for production costs and all that sort of thing and cover design, but then there's a higher royalty rate at the end. But they wanted a very heavy investment from me, so I was like, I'm out. And then a wee while later, I was luckily offered another contract from a small publisher in America, and that almost went ahead, but I felt that it maybe wasn't the best way to go with this book. I was really determined to find a UK publisher, so I did this sort of unthinkable thing for a writer, and I said no and rejected it. Luckily, I then saw a submission call from the Conrad Press. They're based in Canterbury. So I sent off a sample of the book and very quickly heard from James Essinger, who runs the Conrad Press. He got in touch, spoke to me on the phone, asked to see the whole book, and luckily read it very quickly and got back to me. And that's where it all fell into place. And that was about, I think that was August last year, so it's taken till now to finally have it here and be doing this launch. So that's a wee bit of background. Later on, I can see a few people asking some questions. It would be good to spend a bit of time doing that later. I've actually got some questions in advance, so I asked this on my social media over the past few days. If anybody had a question they wanted to ask me already, they could send it in, so I've had a really great response. I'm going to start with a question from Paperback Mo. Paperback Mo is a YouTuber. He has an Instagram page. He is a voracious reader. He reviews lots and lots of books, predominantly young adult books. So Paperback Mo sent me this question.
Hi Matthew, Paperback Mo here. My question is, are any of the events or characters in the book based on events or people in real life?
Thanks for that question. So, yeah, absolutely. There are various little events and details here and there that are based on reality. Apart from the setting, which I talked a wee bit about, some of the little details were definitely based on things from my teenage years, like Nathan's first job that he talks about was in a supermarket. Much like myself, Nathan worked in the now gone but not forgotten Safeway. I also worked in a supermarket that doesn't exist anymore. Nathan talks a lot about going to the cinema at weekends with his friends, and in the novel that's in Perth. I don't actually know if Perth has a cinema, but in my world it did. I spent lots of weekends in Falkirk at the cinema, and a lot of you will know that I'm a bit of a film buff. So some of the films even that I saw growing up are the same films that Nathan goes to see as well. And Nathan himself is partly autobiographical, so there are little aspects of Nathan's personality that are definitely drawn from me. He's an amplified version of me, and some parts of Nathan are fabricated. Nathan's an only child. I am one of 5 children. Nathan does not have a great connection with his parents, and that's not true of me. Hi, Mum and Dad. Hence the dedication in the book. So you'll have to buy one to see what that is. So absolutely, Nathan is a little bit based on me. There is another main character in the book called Iris. Iris is probably the character who is most based on someone I knew in my early 20s, someone I have very vivid memories of. The appearance of Iris is different in the book. I used my imagination there and changed how she looked. But some of you who know the same person as I knew will definitely recognise her in Iris, I think. So I'm going to answer, I've got another question here from George. Hi, George. And here is his question.
Hey, Matthew. My question is, when you're writing in a particular time period, how do you strike the balance between reminding the reader of when it is without overdoing it?
Thanks, George. That's a great question. So the novel is, again, it's set in 1999. We actually follow a year in Nathan's life from 1999 into the new millennium. I think what I wanted to do was any reference that clearly makes the time, the setting obvious. I tried to just include anything that I felt was necessary to the story. Again, like some of the films that Nathan refers to, he talks about Titanic and he talks about My Best Friend's Wedding. I mentioned those as a wee clue to what time this was, but also because the films were quite important to him for various reasons. There are a couple of songs that he references in the book. In chapter 2, he talks about the song Maria by Blondie. And it was a way for me to, again, establish the setting, but the song is quite important. There's something about the lyrics of the song that were significant to him. So I tried to, just include references that would make it obvious, but that were there for a reason. They were important for some reason to Nathan. So hopefully that meant I didn't go over the top with my 90s nostalgia. I think now we've had so many entries for the book prizes, I'm going to pick out some winners. So I will pick a winner for the Jason S. Litz adventure novels. The first winner is here. And this is Liz Stone. I don't know if that's a real Liz Stone or Liz Stone is named after this. That would be a very strange coincidence. Liz Stone, those books are for you. Well done. And I'll now pick a winner for Gail Aldwin's book, The String Games. And there we go. It's Audrey Forrest. Hi, Audrey. I will get that book to you. Now, unless you really want to reveal your whole name and address on YouTube, probably not, you can contact me on my website. There's a contact page, or you can send me a message in social media. I'll put my social media information on the screen a wee bit later on. So I'll move on to the next prize now. Now, as you can see, again, we've got Opal Moon up here in the corner. Opal Moon is a shop in Glasgow where I spent a lot of time as a student, too much time, and lots of money, well spent. Opal Moon is a fantastic shop that is very relevant to the novel and actually definitely inspired the bookshop in the novel as well. Joan at Opal Moon has donated this crystal gift set. I've opened it and had a wee peek and then packaged it up again. I've picked out a couple of things to show you though. So there's this really beautiful amethyst in here. I really love these stones and get quite fixated on them. So I didn't bring out all the stones because it would then just be 5 minutes of me looking at crystals. There's amethyst. There is also a piece of citrine in there, which is a sort of yellowy stone, as the name citrine might suggest. There is aragonite, which is a really sort of rusty, red, shiny stone. There is a piece of labradorite as well, which is a beautiful kind of iridescent blue-green stone. There are also some little tumble stones. Oh, hi, Joan. Joan's here watching. There's some really lovely wee tumble stones like selenite and howlite in here. Now, whether or not you are interested in the healing qualities of stones, or if you just think that they look nice, I would definitely enter this. So, to win the crystal gift set, you this time just need to type the word crystal into the YouTube chat to be in with a chance of winning there. So we'll come back to that a wee bit later. In the meantime, I'm going to read another section from the story. So, and that might lead up to some more questions from you guys. The next section I'm going to read is a few chapters later, still quite early on in the novel because I can't spoil too much. This is from chapter 3. At this point in the novel, Nathan has spotted that the bookshop in Drayton, the village, has a wee poster up in the window. They're looking for a part-time assistant. And he loves the bookshop. He's in there all the time anyway. He's a voracious reader. So he wants to apply, but he's a wee bit nervous about asking his parents because he had a job before and that ended a bit disastrously. He knows the woman who works in the shop. He doesn't know her name, but she has maroon short hair. He always kind of gives her a wave when he goes in. And at this point in the novel, Nathan has been at school, he's had his first day of the new term, and he's getting the little minibus back to Brighton. There are only two other people in the village who go to the same school as him, Johnny and Hannah. So they get off the bus together, and this is where we join Nathan at this point. I wanted to stop at the book cover on the way home to ask Maroon Hair Lady more about the job and how I should apply. The book cover is the name of the bookshop, by the way, and a great name for a bookshop if I say so myself. But Johnny had hopped off the bus with two of his pals, and the three of them swaggered down the street behind me. I didn't fancy giving them something to laugh about as I walked into a bookshop. I could just imagine them having a group fit by the glass front, sticking up their stubby fingers and grunting at the geek. Don't think it would have helped convince the owner that I was a great candidate. And I knew I couldn't be so bold without asking my parents first. Shutting that frosted glass door behind me and hearing it rattle through the empty house marked the beginning of my 2-hour window alone. It must be what a swimmer feels like, surfacing at the end of a race, able to breathe properly again before the next heat begins. A thud upstairs, creaking floorboards. Freya! Might as well feed her now. Another thump, but this time it was from the kitchen, straight ahead of me. Meowing, Freya came trotting towards me, rubbing her stripy head against my shin. I stared down at the oblivious cat. She hadn't been upstairs. Electricity crawled over me. It took a minute before I shouted again. Mum? Dad? An invisible hand squeezed my throat. The silent house was a frozen still around me. Dad, are you home? Freya meowed again. Giving her a hurried rub on the head, I crept forward, feeling like one of those stupid people in horror films walking towards an unexplained noise instead of away from it. But there were no high-pitched strings or creepy piano notes tinkling, no thunder and lightning outside. It was 4 o'clock on a Monday afternoon in the middle of August, and I was in my own house. Mr. Young had said pathetic fallacy was a cliched storytelling technique anyway. It was then, as I neared the stairs, that the smell came, chemical and sharp. It made me think of childhood scrapes and plasters, a hospital smell. Now, Mr. Young is Nathan's English teacher. Nathan really likes English, but doesn't talk to everybody in his class all that much. And Mr. Young has given Nathan a green notebook for this year to keep ideas for stories in. I tried to march up the stairs, but only managed to wobble with one hand on the banister. I pictured the shadow figure standing in my bedroom doorway, waiting for me. Each step felt colder under my feet than the last, and I remembered how cool it had been last night when I stuck my head out the window. I called out for my parents again, thinking maybe they'd just ignored me at first. My mum hated me yelling at her from a distance, expecting her to shout back, but my voice was met with emptiness. As I stepped to my room, the hanging dream catcher on my door looked like it was swaying a little. Not realising I'd balled my hands into clammy fists, I shoved the door open, then jumped back a step. No one was there, but someone had been there. My bedside drawer was open. I never left it like this. Bits of paper and old cinema stubs were scattered on the pillow. The sickening feeling in my stomach from last night plunged back. I stepped inside and found what had made the thud I'd heard. It was behind the door, broken on the floor, glittering up at me. A stone from the crystal growing set I'd bought when I was 12 or 13. I knew they weren't real or worth anything, but I'd been obsessed with it back then and still kept the big green spiky piece on my bookshelf. And here it was, broken in two, surrounded by little shining fragments and shards like smashed glass at a crime scene. I didn't clear it up straight away, just looked at it for a while, stuck still. Someone had been in here, moving things. I sat on the carpet with my back pressed against the wall like my spine was sewn into it, until I heard my mum come in the front door 2 hours later. Even then, I didn't move. Instead, I pulled out the new notebook from my school bag and rubbed the shiny green cover with still shaking fingers. Mr. Young had said it was for story ideas, but maybe I could use it as a diary too. Most writers must get ideas from their own lives. I didn't have nightmares that night. I had a half-sleep of sweat and heat, a tangle of pillows and an aching back and birds twittering in muffled grey light. One of those nights, or mornings really, when you lose judgment of time and how often you wake up from the unconsciousness. and whether you were really waking up at all or just dreaming everything. I knew I had dreamt at times, but there was no order to any of it and no chance of writing it down. The only thing I remember clearly is looking over a banister down a spiral staircase with green carpet. There was a hand holding the banister a floor below me. The rest was just random places and snapshots and glimpses of people, some real, some invented, some forgotten, but no one standing in my doorway. Dad wasn't in the kitchen when I staggered down. More and more often over the past couple of weeks, he'd started leaving to go to the video shop before I'd even had breakfast. He wanted to look at accounts and figures, at least that's what I'd heard him saying to Mum. The shop was in Ballahan, about 10 miles away and in the same town as my school. I'd thought Dad might have asked if I wanted a lift. I'd be there far too early, but maybe the car journey could have been a good time to tell him what had happened in my room yesterday. Mention it with a laugh, as if it hadn't bothered me. But then he might have been annoyed that I was just getting around to telling him that someone had potentially broken into our house. Probably best he'd gone without me. My mum sat in her usual position in the kitchen. She flicked through a newspaper today. I took Dad's place in front of the little TV, eating as if I was in a rush and too busy to talk. Dad's away early, she said. Obviously. Were you doing homework last night? We didn't even see you. I thought about asking her if she'd been in my room, but it was pointless. I already knew it hadn't been her. She avoided my room like it was under quarantine, unless I was having a nightmare. The next few minutes were filled with the sound of my spoon clinking the bowl, toast crunching, newspaper pages flapping, the TV murmuring, needless coughs. It was just how it used to be on those mornings at primary school. The mornings after something had happened. The mornings when Dad wasn't there, although he wasn't quite beaming with pride when he was there. Neither of us would speak. Her wanting to pretend the thing hadn't happened, me praying for her not to ask why the thing had happened. She folded the newspaper and plonked it onto the table. Time for me to go, and you. She pushed the chair back from the table and stood. I needed to ask now. Mum, you know the bookshop? Yes. There's a job, a sign in the window. They need an assistant. She tidied around me, throwing cutlery in the sink and shoving cereal boxes back in cupboards. I wanted to apply. Another job. The last one didn't really work out well, did it? Took too much time of your studying up. Thought that's why you packed it in. That's what I told her. I think she was always on the lookout for such big lies from me that the little ones went unnoticed. I know, but I'm not taking as many subjects this year and it's only around the corner. And it took much longer to get home from Safeway since it was in Ballahan. I don't know if it's a good idea, son. I hated when she put that at the end of her sentences, like the little bag of soggy salad they put in with takeaways to pretend they're healthy. Well, I'll need new books this year for English. I might be able to get them for free if I work in the shop. She shrugged, then grabbed her coat from the back of a chair. I'll talk to your dad about it, she said, without looking at me, and left. So, there's another wee insight into Nathan and his life and how he sees the world. The next wee bit of our time is for me to answer some more questions, I think. So I have another question that someone has sent in advance. But as I play this, feel free to maybe start thinking of some questions you want to ask. And if you put it in the chat, I'll try and see if I can work through them. So here is a question from Louise.
Hi Matthew, congratulations on the book launch. My question is, in the novel, Nathan becomes very interested in the spirit world, and I wondered if that's something that interests you, and how did you go about researching it for the novel?
Thanks, Louise, for that question. I do have a weird fascination with this spirit world and the idea of mediums and ghosts. I've always been fascinated by that, and certainly in my teenage years, but in my early 20s, I became really fascinated with it. Probably too fascinated with it, and I met a lot of interesting people who knew or claimed to know a lot about what the spirit world was and whether or not mediumship was real, and I became really fascinated and again obsessed with crystals, and I would spend a lot of time in wee shops like Opal Moon, which I loved going to, and spending all of my student money on. And I still have a lot of those stones now. So yeah, I was always very interested in it. Over the years, that's waned a bit, and I've got quite a different perspective on a lot of it now. I'm a skeptical person by nature, but I'm an open-minded skeptic. In terms of research that you asked about, Louise, I didn't really have to do a lot of research because, again, it was something that I had learned a lot about when I was younger. So all of this was in my head anyway. And I suppose the beauty of something like, anything supernatural or paranormal is that you can be inventive with it without having to rely on research. So I was able to create my own set of rules, and Iris in the novel, who's a very spiritual character, I was able to just give her her own ideas that didn't really need research because they were Iris's. I'm going to see now maybe if anybody's got any other questions. Feel free to just put them in the box. I've got one or two that a few people asked earlier. I've got a question from Lisa Neal. Lisa asked, have you always wanted to write, or did it come at you by stealth? Hi Lisa, I hope you're watching. Lisa, I definitely always knew that I wanted to write. I was always a reader when I was young. My mum was an English teacher as well, so she always read stories to me, and I was always a reader. So as well as reading, I wanted to create my own stories. So I used to write comic strips a lot. My dad had an Apple Mac, like some sort of prototype Apple Mac back in the day. It was very exciting, and there was some sort of function on that you could create pictures, very basic shapes, but I used to create little stick people and print it out. Quite impressed we had a printer, and so I used to make little comic strips out of that, and I wrote a little play once in primary school and asked the teacher if I could perform it, and she let me, which was cool. So thanks, Mrs. O'Donnell. That was primary 3. She was lovely. So yes, I did always want to be a writer, but I never really took it that. I didn't think it was a real thing. I didn't know anybody who was a writer, so I didn't think I could actually do it. And I had always had lots of ideas, and I did write them down, and I still have notepads from years ago with little ideas that I'm kind of now going back to and finding these really interesting thoughts. But it wasn't until about 8 or 9 years ago that I really thought, wait a minute, I can't just keep saying it would be nice to write a novel one day and not doing anything about it. And I just made a commitment to go for it and start working on my first novel. I jumped in at the deep end and wrote a novel straight away. So I didn't go for short stories and build myself up. I just went straight to a sci-fi novel. There are a few questions here. Broski 2000 is asking a question that someone else asked actually. Have you had any paranormal experiences that could have inspired this? Yeah. The thing is, I then have a terrible memory and forget some of them. There was one I was thinking about earlier. Now, if my nephew Stephen is watching, Stephen will know that this is true and I'm not making this up. Unless Stephen was the mastermind behind it all. I don't think he was. When I was about, this is a very strange one that just always sticks in my memory. When I was about 15 or 16, I was home. My nephew Stephen is only 5-6 years younger than me, and we were watching the film What Lies Beneath. Great film. It's a Robert Zemeckis horror film with Harrison Ford and Michelle Pfeiffer. And there's a kind of motif throughout that film of water. There's a really memorable scene where Michelle Pfeiffer is paralysed and put into a bath, and the bath slowly starts to fill with water, and she can't move, she can't do anything about it, and there are lots of incredible point of view shots of this water slowly rising, and a few scenes in the film where scary stuff happens in the bathroom. And as Stephen and I were watching What Lies Beneath, we suddenly heard this noise coming from upstairs. And no one else was home, and we'd been there for hours. So we paused the film and tried to figure out what this noise was. And we crept upstairs, and it was getting louder. And we opened the bathroom door, and the shower had turned on by itself for no reason. and Stephen had been with me the whole time, and I'd been with him the whole time. So that was a very strange experience, and we were both convinced that the other one had done it, but there was no explanation for that. So, and it had never ever happened before, and it never ever happened again after that. So that was very scary. So I'm not sure what the explanation is there, but that creeped us out. There are a few other questions here. Hanato's asking, was it more difficult writing this novel as it's loosely based on your experiences? That's similar to another question that Jane asked earlier. Jane asked, was it easier or more difficult to write this than your first novel? This was easier to write for several reasons. Probably the fact that it was based partly on some of my own experiences did make it easier and more enjoyable to write. My first novel was set, hundreds of years in the future, and although there were characters and events that were based in reality, it was a completely fictional world with its own set of time travel rules. The Stone in My Pocket was much easier to write, probably because I had the experience of writing a whole novel and figuring out what you really need to plan in advance and what works best in terms of structure. So I'd learned so much from the first novel that inevitably writing another one was easier. But yeah, writing about my own experiences was quite enjoyable and fun to play with some real characters and draw inspiration from people who I knew and places that I had been. Lewis has asked a good cat question. Is the cat in the book based on your own cats? And do you find them an inspiration or a pleasant distraction from the writing process? Lewis, that is such a good question. They are. It's nice to have a cat curled up in your lap when you're doing a bit of writing, so that's very soothing at times. The cats are not in this room and are locked away because they would be a complete nightmare. When I was doing wee test runs, this microphone has been knocked onto the floor countless times. So cats are not good for live streaming. The cat in the novel, Freya, is not really based on my cats, although there's a kind of a strange story there as well. I wrote, maybe it's not that strange. I wrote the first draft of the book years ago, and then actually kind of left it for a while. I think because I was finalising my first novel, and I had written this cat Freya into it. Then left the book for about a year and didn't look at it. And in the meantime, I then actually got a cat called Freya. And after we had Freya, the real cat, I then returned to the novel and was quite surprised I had a cat in it called Freya that was obviously lodged somewhere in my subconscious, but I'd completely forgotten that. So that was kind of funny to come back and discover that. Might be time for another question. Chris. Hi, Chris. Chris is asking, really enjoyed your readings. Would you consider doing the audiobook version of your novels? That's a great question, and that is something that I've been thinking about. So I would really love to do that. I think it would be quite time consuming, but if I could get to grips with the process of doing it, which from what I've looked into is even more complicated than streaming live to YouTube, if I could get my head around that, I'd really love to do an audiobook. I could get someone else to do it, that is an option, but I already have a Scottish accent, so that suits Nathan quite well. And I suppose I know the book better than anyone else, so I'm quite used to reading out loud as a teacher and doing events like this, so I'd love to do an audiobook. That would be great. Now, there are a few other questions, and I don't know if I've got time to answer them just now, but what I think I'll do is maybe another little video this week at some point where I can answer all of the other questions that people have asked that I didn't get time for today. So I'll do that and I'll put it on my social media. So anybody that asked a question, I will endeavour to answer it. What I'll do just now is pick a winner for the crystal gift set from Opal Moon. So I can see lots of entries here. Joan is asking if I can put the book cover back up. Yep. There we go. There's the book cover. Here is the winner of the crystal gift set. Uh, and the winner is Louise B. Well done, Louise. I think you are the perfect person to win that prize. So, hooray, congratulations. We've got about 10 minutes left, and I've got a few final things to tell you. One of them is surely the most important thing of all. I want to tell you a bit about how you can get the stone in my pocket. The easiest way right now is to find this on my website. So there is a link underneath this video in the description. That'll take you right there. My website is matthewkeeley.co.uk, and there is a store there. Now you have a couple of options. You can buy the book like this, paperback. It's $9.99, and it's also available on Waterstones. So you can go into the Waterstones website and pre-order it. Technically, it's not published until Thursday. I'm just using my authorial license and making it available to you guys on my website just now. But Thursday is really the official publication date. So it's on Waterstones to pre-order, and it will be on Amazon as well. You can get this on Kindle too. So from Thursday, it should appear on Amazon. The Kindle will be $3.99. However, if you want a physical book, you can buy it like this from my website. Or there's an extra option that you've got here, which is a bit exciting. Now you can go into my site and order the Onyx bundle. Now I'll explain what that is. If you buy the Onyx bundle, you will get lots of extra things. You'll get a copy of the book, and I will also sign it for you and personalise it. So if you pick that option, it'll ask you if you want a wee message or if you want it dedicated to somebody. So you'll do that. You will also get the Stone in My Pocket bookmark, and you will get an actual stone that the book is named after. The Stone in My Pocket is a metaphorical and literal title. So in this novel, without any spoilers, Nathan at some point begins to carry a stone around with him, and it's one of these. This is a black onyx, and you have to read the book to find out why he's picked that stone and how he's come to have it under quite odd circumstances. So if you buy the Onyx bundle, and now you know why it's called the Onyx bundle, you get a stone as well. There are several other things that I'll give you too. As well as the bookmark, you will also, for a wee bit of fun, get some fortune telling cards. Now I'm not going to turn these over because that would ruin what these are. They're all different, so no two people will get the same cards. You'll also get a crystal card. I have a whole set of these to give away, and each one features a gemstone or a precious metal. This one is blue calcite. Tells you a wee bit about this stone. These cards have got quite a good sense of humour about them, and if you believe in this kind of thing, as Nathan ends up doing, the cards tell you a bit about what some people believe this stone could do for you, and how you should wear it and that sort of thing. And they also just are really cool cards, and they look nice. One other thing that I'll give, as long as I have copies, anyone who buys the Onyx bundle on my website, I'm going to send you one of these too. This is from the Scottish Book Trust, and these anthologies were published as part of Book Week Scotland in November. And the reason that I'm giving these away is because I'm in it. So I've got a wee piece of writing called Clearing the Fog in here. It's an autobiographical short piece about some funny memories I have from high school in my 6th year, funnily enough. And there's lots of other great, really short pieces of writing from Scottish writers, and there's some poetry as well. I have about 20 of these, so the first 20 people who buy an Onyx bundle, I'll give you one of those as well. So you get a signed copy of the book, personalised. I'll give you a bookmark, I'll give you an Onyx, I'll give you fortune telling cards, a crystal card, and I'll give you one of these. And more importantly, I promised this earlier, there's a discount code for really just you. So anybody who's tuning in just now, that if you use the code 10OFF, you'll get 10% off either the book alone or the Onyx bundle, or Turning the Hourglass is on there as well. So the discount applies to that too. I'm only giving this code out here on the book launch, so it won't appear in my social media anywhere. And it's only for today. So this ends at midnight to get this discount. A couple of final things to tell you about then before we finish. After today, there's going to be another competition. So if you buy a copy of The Stone in My Pocket, or you download it on Kindle, you have the opportunity to win a £20 Amazon gift card. All you need to do is take a picture of your book, and you can be in it if you want, selfie or not. If you post a picture of the book with a pet, then I will look fondly upon that and give you 100 entries. No, I'm just kidding, but I would like to see your pets. If you take a picture and you put it on your social media, your Instagram or your Twitter or Facebook, and tag me at Matthew J. Keeley, and use the hashtag The Stone in My Pocket, I'll enter you into the Amazon gift card giveaway. So that's for £20. I've got a wee example here. Now Louise is ahead of the curve. So this is Lou McJ on Instagram. So here we go. Louise posted a picture of her novel as she was almost at the end, and she tagged me in it. So if you do that, I'll enter you into this giveaway. All that's really left for me is to show you how you can reach me. So I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Matthew J. Keeley, and my Facebook page is Matthew Keeley Writer. If you were one of the competition winners, then you could send me a message on there to give me your address, and I'll send your prizes to you. To finish off, one of the ways that you could really help out is to leave reviews. A few people have finished the book already, which is very impressive. If you use Goodreads, that's a fantastic place. There's already some really lovely reviews on there at this point. So if you use Goodreads, you could leave, and it's very quick. You don't need to write anything. You can give it a star rating, so just hit the 5-star button. And then Amazon as well, you can leave reviews there, and Waterstones, if you buy from there, you can leave reviews on their site too. And really now, it's just time for me to say thanks. So thanks for everybody. I'm pleasantly surprised at everybody who's tuned in. Thank you so much. I had a fear it would be me talking to a computer and maybe my mum and dad watching. So thanks so much. Oh, hi Rebecca. Hi Matthew, another Matthew, and Joan and Cess and Stephen and Chris. That's really nice. Thanks for leaving comments. I'll leave us there. Thank you so much. And I'll play us out with. I prepared something in case there were technical problems. Thank goodness there haven't been. So this is your little treat as we go. Thanks so much, everybody, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye bye.